Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one. Welcome back to Mingles with Jingles. So, yeah, what's been going on this week then? Well, I've been playing a lot of the Forever Winter. And I mean a lot. If you believe my Steam profile, I've got 60 hours into this thing. Although that's not strictly true because of, well, let me explain. So, I don't know if you recall, I put a Forever Winter video up and I've already talked about this game in Mingles with Jingles, but I said that for early access, it's effectively an alpha. It was remarkably stable, and at the time that I said that, it was true. I'd been playing it for a week and a bit, and it had never crashed once. And then 2 days after I said that, it suddenly wouldn't stop crashing. What are you going to do? That's the risk you take when you buy into early access. It is, as I said, effectively an alpha version of the game. And the devs are pushing out hotfixes on a at least weekly basis, and it's not as bad as far as stability is concerned as it was about a week ago, but I still do get the occasional crash. And what actually happened was that I was playing, it crashed again, I was like, oh, that's it, I'm done, enough for the night. So I'm back on the desktop, I do a final check of my emails for the day, and I say, alright, that's it, I'm off to bed. Came back to the PC the next morning, and according to Steam, the game was still running. So Steam had logged an additional 12 hours or so of me playing the game when it had actually just crashed, but not actually fully executed the crash back to desktop, and yeah, anyway. But I've still got a good 50 hours in, and I am very much enjoying it. I love the concept. I never thought I would be getting into an extraction shooter as much as this, because something like Escape from Tarkov, it just doesn't interest me. But this thing, oh yeah, definitely. Regarding the water mechanic, however, so I'm sure most of you are probably aware of what I'm talking about, but I'll just give a quick recap for the benefit of those who don't, because this, as I kind of predicted, was going to be the major deal breaker point for a lot of people where this game was concerned. So, you need to have a supply of water at your base, otherwise everybody leaves. And the water depletes in real time. So if you log in one day and at the end of the gaming session you've got 4 days worth of water, but then you don't log in again for another 5 days, when you log in, that water has depleted in real time, and when you get back in, there will be no water, everybody will have left, and it's effectively game over. And as predicted, this was a major bone of contention for the vast majority of people who watched my first Forever Winter video. And that's totally understandable. I even predicted as much because, well, people have lives outside of gaming. You can't always guarantee that you're going to be able to log in every day and accumulate the water that you need to not have your game basically end the next time you log in. At the same time, it's not, at the moment I have more water than I know what to do with. I see a water container when I'm out on a raid, and I don't even bother picking it up anymore because it's just not worth it. And that shouldn't really come as any kind of surprise, because all of these like extraction / survival type games, they're all pretty much like that. Resources are the big stumbling block right at the start, but once you've gotten a couple of hours in, they stop being as important because you've got more than you're ever going to need. And that's definitely the case with the Forever Winter 2. The problem is just getting to that point is really, really hard. However, the devs have just released a bulletin, and they haven't said exactly what it is they're going to do with the water mechanic, but they are definitely changing it. That much they have confirmed. So, bearing in mind that they have refused to elaborate on exactly what it is they're doing with regards to water collection, I find it very hard to believe that they would be doing anything to make it even harder. So it's probably good news, because the whole having to log in continuously in order to build up a water supply was the deal breaker for a lot of people who watched my first Forever Winter video. And, like I said, 100% understandable. It is a very controversial mechanic, but the devs are looking into it, and when they have announced or implemented what it is that they're going to do, I'll let you know. So, yeah, the Forever Winter, that's what's been occupying most of my time over the course of the last week or so. It's not the only thing, though. Funnily enough, while we're on the discussion of bugs, as many of you are probably aware, I do like me a bit of World of Warcraft. Probably shouldn't come as a surprise. The Mighty Jingles is in fact the name of my gnome warlock on my main account. These days, though, I mostly play Warcraft Classic, which is currently in the Cataclysm expansion. And at the moment, because it's October, they do these seasonal events, usually every month. And October is the Hallows End Festival, which involves, amongst other things, killing a headless horseman and travelling around the world collecting loot from candy buckets. Now, as a further incentive to complete these seasonal achievements, I mean, you don't have to, they're entirely optional, but as an incentive to get them completed, there's a meta achievement called What a Long Strange Trip It's Been. And in order to unlock the meta achievement and get a fancy new flying mount, you have to complete all of the seasonal achievements. And it's quite an undertaking, because it will take you an entire year to get the meta achievement done, because, the achievements associated with it are seasonal. They don't all happen at the same time. So being able to actually complete these seasonal achievements is a fairly big deal, because if you can't complete them, you can't get the meta achievement. So one of these seasonal Hallows End achievements, the Halloween things, is collecting candy from candy buckets scattered all around the world of Warcraft. And there's this one particular candy bucket in a zone called the Arathi Highlands of this place called Refuge Point. It just wasn't there. And I know it should have been there because there's an achievement tracker. You can see which candy buckets you have and you haven't yet collected. And the last one in the Eastern Kingdoms that I needed to get was the one at Refuge Point in Arathi Highlands. But there was just nothing there. There was a lot of other people wandering around looking very confused trying to find it, but no candy bucket. So I went to Google, put in the search string, World of Warcraft, candy bucket, Refuge Point. Instantly got like a dozen hits. And big surprise, they were all to do with it being bugged and just not being visible. Apparently it's there, but it's invisible and nobody can interact with it. All kinds of people are having problems getting this whole achievement, and therefore the meta achievement done because of this bugged candy bucket. But that's not the surprise. I mean, there's a bug in World of Warcraft. Big deal. The surprise was, I thought I was looking at the Cataclysm Classic search results, but no, this is retail World of Warcraft. So just to put this into context for you, Warcraft didn't start doing achievements until the introduction of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. This was the second expansion for World of Warcraft. It was released on the 13th of November 2008, and it was in this expansion that they introduced the whole achievement system. So I'm Googling World of Warcraft Classic achievement bugs, and I'm getting World of Warcraft Retail achievement bugs, which means this particular bug has been in the game since 2008. So it's not only still bugged on retail, they replicated it and put it back into the game for the classic version. Now they fix it within a couple of days of the Hallows End seasonal event happening, but they keep putting the bug back in every year and keep having to fix it every year. Now I'm no game developer, and yet I can't help but feel that there's probably a slightly more efficient way of fixing this. But they're Blizzard. Small indie company with limited resources. They've only had 16 years to patch this particular bug out and nail it at source, and it keeps popping up every year. Wow. People keep complaining about Bethesda games. And well, they're right to, because Bethesda, with their creation engine, are notorious for having bugs in their game engine that keep popping up in every Bethesda game that's been released since Fallout 3. There are bugs in Fallout 76 and probably in Starfield as well that have been in the game since the release of Fallout 3 in 2008, and they keep popping up with every new game that Bethesda push out. It's become something of a meme at this point with Bethesda, because the one thing that you can guarantee that's going to happen every time Bethesda shit out a new game using the creation engine is that there are going to be the same bugs that have been in it all the way back from Fallout 3. In fact, people even joke that the only new thing Bethesda has done since Skyrim in 2011 is introduce new bugs. I mean, we're joking, but we have a point, because let's face it, Starfield is just Skyrim in space. It's basically exactly the same plot. You more or less play exactly the same character. In Skyrim, you were the Dragonborn with these special magical powers that nobody else had, and in Starfield, you're the Starborn. I mean, you can see how little effort they put into even pretending that they were doing anything different. In Starfield, you're the Starborn with all of these special magical powers that nobody else could have. It's just Skyrim in space, except with a whole lot more nothing to do, and 12 times the number of loading screens. So, yeah, people give Bethesda shit, and rightfully so, for all of the legacy bugs that each new game they push out seems to inherit from previous versions. But Blizzard aren't exactly innocent on that count either. I suppose Blizzard are glad that Bethesda exists, because otherwise they'd be the poster child for legacy bugs that seem to keep surviving from one version of the game to the next. Speaking of new versions of games, anybody notice the Subnautica 2 trailer just dropped? I have to admit, I did get very, very confused when people were saying, "Oh, Jingles, Subnautica 2, what do you think? What do you think?" Because I thought, well, what? Am I stuck in some kind of time warp here? Because I played Below Zero. But yeah, Below Zero wasn't Subnautica 2, was it? It was more sort of Subnautica 1.5. But yeah, apparently, coming into early access next year, Subnautica 2. Ordinarily, and I've gotten very, very excited about this, but unfortunately I did play Below Zero. So let's just say that kind of took the edge off my anticipation of a new Subnautica title. I mean, Below Zero wasn't bad. We need to be clear on this. There was nothing... Well, okay, there were some bad things about it, but as a whole, it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't that good, and it was in no way as good as the original Subnautica. I mean, you spent about a third of the game above water, on land. It's like the developers forgot what the title of their game was. You do understand what Subnautica actually means, right? Oh, never mind, whatever. And it was the above water things that were kind of... Because your primary mode of transport was... I can't even remember what the name of that thing was. It was kind of like a hover bike, the Snow Fox. Because the vehicles in the original game, the underwater submersibles in Subnautica, were absolutely incredible and one of the game's major selling points. And then in Below Zero, you got the Snow Fox, this sort of hover bike. And it kind of sucked because it was a hover bike. And, well, I mean, it was really, really hard to steer. Which is accurate. I don't know if you've ever tried to steer a hovercraft. When they get going in one direction, they don't like to turn. And that was true of the vehicle in the game as well. But if that's the case, then why put a hover bike in the game? If it's going to be such a bitch to steer and get around on, then don't... You see where I'm going with this? I mean, it's not hard, is it? And then the one thing that the hover bike couldn't do, which might have made it marginally actually useful, was hover over water. Guys, you know what hovercraft are for, right? I mean, nobody builds hovercraft in the real world to navigate around on land. I mean, they can, but that's incidental to the whole purpose. The purpose of a hovercraft, it's a water transport. They put a water transport in Sub-Zero that couldn't transport you over water. I mean, gee, And then, of course, you got the whole thing where... I know I'm about to start a raging dumpster fire in the comments section, but you can't have an honest discussion about Subnautica Below Zero without mentioning this, where certain of the game developers got fired over what basically boiled down to identity politics. The one guy in particular that I'm thinking of, although he wasn't the only one, said, "They began asking me how I would react if they hired a Muslim or a trans person. I said I'd debate them like anyone else in the team if I disagreed with them. They then said that this would create an unwelcoming working environment and that they see it as a problem that almost only white men are working there and they need more diversity, and that what I said would make that difficult to achieve." So that was a quote from the former Subnautica sound designer, who went by the name of Simon Chilinsky. And according to him, he was basically fired for saying that he would treat everybody that he worked with equally. According to him. According to Unknown Worlds, the Subnautica development team, he was fired for making a whole bunch of hateful comments. Now, who do you believe? Because he did make a lot of very insensitive tweets right before he was fired. One of these tweets was that the game should include a diversity slider. Where's the exact comment? Here it is. A diversity slider in games to make the character progressively darker, more feminine, and less sexy, with the implication being that the darker and more feminine you are, the less sexy you are. And on the subject of Unknown Worlds hiring anybody who wasn't white and male, he tweeted that importing random people from the third world is also importing third world tier crime rates and IQ. Now, I don't believe that this guy was being deliberately malicious. I think he probably just thought he was being funny. But it's important that the entire subject is correctly put into context here, because there's always two sides to every story. Because you've got one half of the internet saying that this award-winning sound designer was fired by Unknown Worlds because he refused to buckle under to the company's new diversity agenda and insisted that everybody should be treated the same regardless of their skin colour or gender orientation, and shouldn't be given any special privileges because of it, and should be just treated exactly the same as everybody else. And I can kind of sympathise with that to a degree, because that's more or less exactly the way I feel. I believe everybody should be given a fair crack of the whip regardless of skin colour, sexual orientation or whatever. Everybody should be judged on their own merits. But then you've got the other half of the internet saying, no, he wasn't fired because of that, he was fired because he was a bigoted arsehole. And then they point to all of these tweets that he made as evidence of that. And, you know, I have to admit, some of these tweets were pretty bad. So who's right and who's wrong? Because, I mean, that's the way arguments on the internet work, isn't it? Somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong. But do they? What if everybody's right? And what if everybody's wrong at the same time? Because there's a third option, isn't there? I know this has come as a big surprise to the internet, but there usually is a third option, which rarely gets addressed. What if what he said was true? He would treat a Muslim or trans person in just the same way as he would treat everybody else. But what if Unknown Worlds Entertainment were also correct, and he was fired because he was a bigoted arsehole? Well, there's a simple solution that encompasses both of those apparently completely opposite viewpoints. What if the guy was just an arsehole? Because based on the tweets that he made, he would appear to be a massive raging arsehole. But that doesn't mean that what he said, when asked about how he would treat a Muslim or trans employee, that doesn't mean that what he said, that he would treat them the same way he treated everybody else, wasn't also true. It could just mean that he would be just as big an arsehole to a brand new Muslim or trans employee as he was to all of the other employees. And that's what got him fired. I mean, it certainly supports the available facts as we know them. Maybe the guy was just a twat. I mean, I don't know him personally, but it supports the evidence. I mean, this, of course, doesn't get Unknown Worlds Entertainment off the hook for insisting that they go around hiring people based on sexual orientation and religion rather than how good they are at their jobs. And that kind of showed in Subnautica Below Zero, because it wasn't very good. And is the main reason why I'm not terribly excited about the Subnautica 2 teaser trailer. I honestly couldn't care less that the only two human characters shown in the teaser trailer are, well, neither of them are white males. I mean, I honestly don't give a shit. It's completely irrelevant and not worth getting angry over. I mean, seriously, would Alien Isolation have been improved if the main character had been Ellen Ripley's son rather than Ellen Ripley's daughter? Quite aside from the fact that Ellen Ripley didn't have a son, she only did have a daughter, Amanda, who died a couple of years before she got back out of hypersleep from the... Well, you get the idea. It doesn't matter. I don't care who the character is. I care that the character is well written, with a decent plot and story to back them up. And that's why I'm getting worried about Subnautica 2. Not based on the teaser trailer, but based on just how meh Subnautica Below Zero was. But anyway, moving on. Space Marine 2. They've just released a 4K texture pack. Holy shit, it's big. I mean, it's absolutely huge. The base game, Space Marine 2... Oh, this texture pack's completely free, by the way. You just download it from Steam or Epic, wherever you got Space Marine 2 from, restart the game, and bingo, 4K textures in your Space Marine 2. But the base game took up 75 gigabytes of your hard drive, or SSD. Let's face it, it's usually SSDs these days. The texture pack jacks up that requirement to 160 gigabytes. The texture pack is bigger than the game. Oh, and it also significantly jacks up the recommended system specifications. So the recommended system specifications to play Space Marine 2 without the texture pack at 1080p and 60 frames per second with the Ultra Graphics preset, and it is a spectacularly pretty game even without this 4K resolution texture pack. But just to play the base game at 1080p with 60 frames per second, ultra graphics, you need an AMD Ryzen 7 5800X, or the equivalent Intel CPU, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and an 8 gigabyte VRAM graphics card. Bare minimum, something like an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070. With the texture pack installed, you need the next generation of CPU with at least 12 cores, so something like an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X, or the Intel equivalent. 16 gigabytes of RAM is still good enough, but you need a 12 gigabyte VRAM graphics card, a bare minimum of a GeForce RTX 3080, and 160 gigabytes of available storage space. Bear in mind that this is the minimum specification for playing the game with the 4K texture pack at only 30 frames per second. If you want to play the game at the recommended specifications for the 4K pack, you're going to need an AMD Ryzen 9 7900X 3D. You're still going to need a graphics card with at least 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and some users are saying actually 16 or even 24 gigabytes is better. And you're talking about, at bare minimum, a GeForce RTX 4070 Super in order to get this thing running at anything higher than 30 frames per second. Now, while it's true that those are some eye-watering recommended system specifications, there's really no downside here, because first of all, the texture pack is free. It doesn't cost you anything other than the download. And if you find that it does bring your system to its knees, well, just uninstall it and restart the game. And the game does look amazing even without it. I mean, it is a remarkably pretty game, even at 1080p. You don't need this texture pack. I mean, the game is still going to look amazing. And downloading and installing a 4K texture pack isn't going to make it any easier either. It's still rock hard. Anyway, that's it, I suppose, for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I know I've ignited a raging dumpster fire in the comments with the whole Subnautica 2 thing, but it needed talking about. I'm just sad that we live in a world where that sort of thing does need talking about. But what are you going to do? Anyway, looking forward to seeing the comments. I'm really not. And as always, take care. I'll catch you next time.